Hi, Anja.
Hi.
And welcome to this conversation, which is actually the first conversation we have. We have planned a couple of conversation
Mm.
around relevant topics, but you have a different role that as a guest on this show, and you are more a person who, yeah, you are a psychosynthesis psychotherapist, and you have a broad client base, and we have had some conversation about what is it for type of topics and problems and challenges that people face today in this culture that we are living in, where social media is creating a lot of social pressure on each individual. You know, there's so many powerful agents out there, capitalistic companies that try to sell different types of identity, and there are so many ideologies that capture especially young people today. You
Mm.
know, they are very influenced by powerful influencers that all sell, you know, the right lifestyle, the right opinion. So what we could call the self and its role in modern society is actually a very, very deep question. How do we solve this new social arena that we all lives in, where we are constantly bombarded with diverging and often conflicting opinions about how to live our life, what to believe. And you have some experiences, and I would like to, you know, offer my competence also as a psychosynthesis thinker, and in joint cooperation, we would try to take some of these problems up and see if we can give some interesting feedback or positive thoughts to come around this problem. But could you tell a little bit about yourself and your work, and what type of problems that you encounter or challenges you encounter in your clinical practice?
Well, I've studied several psychotherapeutic approaches, but as with you, my main background is in psychosynthesis psychotherapy, within which I have a master's at University of East London, as yourself.
Mm.
And I also completed the 4-year training program at the Norwegian Institute for Psychosynthesis Psychotherapy. So psychosynthesis has kind of been the main approach that I've been working with. And for the last 2 decades, I've been working in mental health. But last few years, I've kind of gone back to more like academic like theory, looking into depth psychology, also doing religious studies, and being more preoccupied with, you know, how the zeitgeist of our time, how the society today is impacting our ability to feel okay about ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I meet with my clients all the time, that they feel this enormous pressure to be, um, you know, this self as a product,
Mm.
that they have to market themselves on social media, and this sort of acknowledgement of likes and followers are taking on the previous roles as maybe, you know, friends did back in the days, of being acknowledged by someone close to you. Now you're being acknowledged on the internet by people you've never
Oh, yeah.
met.
Yeah.
So that's I see that with particularly my young clients, that they feel very uh, confused. I think they feel that pressure, but they don't know how to navigate that landscape.
No. I think it was a very powerful concept you introduced, self as a product.
Mm.
Could you say a little bit more about that? I think really it's something that many people are captured by, you know, this concept that they have to sell themselves online.
Yes, and it is. There's been, well, I just have to talk about the young clients that I've had, and their how much time they spend on the internet and how they on social media, and the images they're putting out are all filtered to look in a certain way. They are trying to sort of this hobbies and interest and what they're wearing and what they're saying has to be in a certain way, and then they're putting it out, they're projecting it out there, and then they're hoping that they will be liked or someone will follow them. And if they don't, they feel like they're failures or not good enough. At the same time, that the difference between the image of themselves they're projecting out there and how they feel they are, it's getting wider and wider, and that gap is creating a lot of almost existential anxiety, I think, in lots of them. Yeah.
Wow, yes, that's a really, really powerful description of a dilemma, you know, because it in some way you can say that it's driven by a need for love. It's driven by a need for being acknowledged and seen. And the whole problem is that in order to be loved, you have to project a perfect image of yourself. And as you said, if the gap between what's the reality and what's my social image becomes too large, then of course you know you are fake. You know that the identity you have created online is actually very little about who you actually are, you know. And I understand that this gap between the projected self and the real self is creating a lot of anxiety, because of course there will come some kind of a fear of being revealed or being, you know, found out that I'm actually fake, that I'm not the one that I project. So I see that, and I can also see the problem that, and of course to the viewers here, we would try to speak from a psychosynthesis point of view and what psychosynthesis is recommending in respect to building an authentic identity. And this is, you know, very, very different, because what they in some way are doing is they are creating a false ideal model. We have this concept of ideal models, and an ideal model is an image of our future self. But in psychosynthesis, we speak about ideal model as it has to be based on real qualities and real character within us. So we are never going to develop any identity that is not based on authentic, validated qualities in ourselves. But what the social medias in some way are doing, they give us all these tools, filters and lightning and surroundings, and they are optimizing our ability to create a fake or unreal reality that is glamorized, that is portraying some kind of a ideal state. And if our social group believe that this is our reality, then we get this projection from our social group upon us that we live this celebrity life. So in some way you can say social media gives us an opportunity to become celebrities, all of us, but based on a fake reality. And every time we base our identity on something unreal, on something fake, it will create anxiety, because we know there is no solid ground in how we portray ourselves. And of course, this is it can turn into an existential crisis. What's your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. And I think we have to maybe question, I'm seeing it as we are becoming both the product and the consumers at the same time. And I think some kind of awareness about how we are being sold images all the time, and ideas about how we're supposed to be online, I think we have to step back and really ask ourselves questions, what do I want to do with this, and taking some time off this, a time out from this social media world to connect with something that is more real. And I guess psychosynthesis has got quite a few tools to do exactly that.
Yeah. Perhaps we could speak a little bit about identity, and try to introduce how psychosynthesis understand identity. And we have the different psychological functions, and as Jolie introduced, 7 different psychological functions. But let's for simplicity's sake focus on the body, emotion, and mind. These are the 3 principal functions. We could speak about 2 very different types of identity. We could speak about objective identity based on these psychological functions, and we could speak about pure subjective identity. And this is where psychosynthesis really offers something authentic, because in psychosynthesis we believe that we actually are pure consciousness itself. We are not our thoughts, we are not our emotions, we are not our sensations, but we actually have a capacity and an ability to find that place of pure presence, of pure awareness, where we can observe everything that's going on within our personality. And if you never have heard that thought before, I know it's quite difficult to grasp. But a lot of mindfulness training today, a lot of meditative techniques today is about guiding you into that experience of you as consciousness itself. But if we this is absolutely not the first identity we develop. It's something that comes very, very late. The first identity we develop, and I call them objective identity because it's something we can observe. And it's our identity, for instance, based on the body and the material universe. We can become very identified with our gender. We can become very identified with our appearance, with our age, with our race. And we cannot say that identity on these immutable characteristics are fake or false. That is part of how we show up in the world. It's part of the outer identity we can have, and there is some, you could say, authenticity in finding out what type of woman do I want to be, what type of man do I want to be, what is my relation to my body. And we can find an authentic expression that is related to our body. But one thing is for sure, and that is our body will change. It can never become a permanent identity, because our body becomes ill, and we can have an injury, so we don't like ourselves. And if we are very, very identified with our body, and the morals judge our appearance as not attractive, then it will really harm our self-esteem, our self-respect, if all our identity are caught up in how we look and what race we are and what gender we are. So
now you're talking about body as also appearance, not just the physical body,
yes,
but overall your appearance.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, the body gives us the senses. And many people find identity in their external environment. What city am I brought up in? I come from the north, or I come from the south, or I come from this city, on this city. And we can also be identified with our economic status. We can become with our money, our possessions. I drive this car, and I wear this type of clothes. And all these types of identity that is based on these external material components are not solid as a permanent identity. It's something that is changeable. And the problem is, the more we are identified with these factors, external factors, the more our identity can be influenced by external factors. So psychosynthesis advise us to find something deeper, something more permanent, something unchanging inside of us. And that's our consciousness, that's our pure awareness, that's our ability to make choices. That's the will part of our essential identity. And let me just finish. We can also be very identified with our emotions and our temperaments. And we can find identity in, well, I'm a depressed type, or I'm a melancholic type, or I'm a positive type of people. I'm always happy. You know, we can take identity in some rather stable emotional atmosphere we have, but these are also very unstable, because we know we come out and experience life changes, and our emotions will suddenly disappear. We wake up one morning and feel totally different. So the type of identity based on particular emotional states are also very, very unstable. The same if we identify with our mind and our opinions, then we identify with, I'm a left wing, or I'm a right wing, or I believe to this religious group, or to that social group, or we became identified with our knowledge. I'm a scientist, or no, I'm an artist. And all these external identities are unstable. They don't give any secure, stable, inner core identity. They will always be manageable, because we can change our opinions, and we should definitely. And the last thing I would like to say is that the last part of the objective identities we can be caught up in is our social roles. We can be identified as a parent. I'm a mother. If you ask a person, who are you? Yeah, I'm a mother, and I'm a teacher, and I'm a wife. Okay, there is the three of the major social roles. But if you identified with that, with being a mother, what happens when your children moves from home? And if you identify with being a woman, a married woman, what happens when you get divorced? Who are you then? So again, social roles can never be a true foundation for identity, but of course we should play these social roles. We should play, it's part of our expression, but we have to hold them loosely. We have to be creative. And first and foremost, we have to find out, who am I as an authentic woman? Who am I as an authentic parent? Because we should fill this role with our authentic qualities, and finding out our authentic qualities as a human being and bring that into our different social roles, because we all must play social roles. We are part of a social matrix. But the core issue is here that we get caught up in a role, and then we get so influenced by all the social constructs of being a woman. What does that mean? The social constructs of being a man. What does that mean? And this is where I see many young people, if we should bring it back to the problems, they are caught up in social constructs. That means narratives about who I should be if I am an acceptable man or a woman or a left wing or a right wing or whatever we identify with. And the solution here is that we have to take a step back. We have to disidentify from all these external factors and have time to reflect and find out who am I beyond these masks, these social roles, these opinions, these attachment to where I was brought up, attachment to my economic status. Who am I behind all those roles? That's the big question that psychosynthesis is pointing to, and we can investigate that later. What will that say? But what do you think about this
Well, I
presentation?
think there was one word that you were using that I've been talking to a couple of my clients about, and that's the narrative, that we have this narrative about ourselves, this story about who I
Yes.
am, this story I'm telling myself and other people, this idea and narrative story I'm navigating myself in relation to other with.
Yeah.
And having a good look at that story, that narrative, and what that consists of is often quite useful,
Yeah.
because that's when they understand that this is basically just a story I'm telling myself. This is
Yeah.
not the truth. This is just something that it's just a narrative.
Yeah.
And I'm actually free to change that. And I
Yeah.
think that's hugely liberating. But in order to change that, they also feel the need to have something deeper to fall back onto, something else to hang on to, because we need, it seems to me that we need some kind of identity as almost like a vehicle. I don't know how exactly to explain it, but we need the identity. But
Yes.
it's finding that sort of more authentic sense of identity than all these various stories that we have created over the years that we tell the world who we are.
Yeah. I think that's a really good put. What is your experience? What is, if you look at it from a psychosynthesis perspective, what have you encountered being one of the best strategies to help people transition from, you could say, one of the first identity we develop is a social identity, and related to the things I've just presented, and there is a transition from our social identity to a more individualized, a more integrated identity, where we have in some way thought deeply about what do I truly believe myself, politically, socially, and who I am if I really dig deep into my core qualities. What feels natural for me? What are my core needs? I think this is very, very helpful when we help people and ourselves to navigate this question, to find out what is authentic for me, and then create a space where we can investigate that without shame. And what I really suggest, and what I found most valuable, is to have people around that allows one to think freely, and also to perhaps express opinions and needs and feelings that could be taboo in the social group that we are belonging to, in order to experiment with what feels natural for oneself. How do you navigate this transition in your clients from being very attached to these social images and these narratives that are rampant on social media, and then finding back home?
Well, I think you said it yourself. It's starting with disidentifying. So asking the question, what would it be like if you didn't think of yourself in this way? So this gradual disidentification with with these narratives and stories and ideas about themselves, just to see what happens then, and usually I find that it kind of opens up a space where they can explore something that feels more authentic, feels like it's resonating on a deeper level. So I think starting with this identification has been
Could you
usually the
tell
first
us?
step.
Could you tell a little bit about how you work with disidentification for the viewers who have not heard about this concept before? It's very, very central in psychosynthesis. But when you have a new client and you are going to introduce this concept of disidentification, how do you present it?
Well, it's a good question. I think it varies a bit depending on what the presenting issue of the client is. But oftentimes they come with, say, for example, a mental health issue, whether it's anxiety or depression, or there's a range of emotions that they're finding quite difficult to deal with. And it's often connected to a certain relationship or work situation or life transition of some sort. And then usually this disidentifying from the feelings is a good starting point to say that, okay, can you, as you said, can you observe your feelings? Don't believe that, the feeling is not you. Can you create some distance to that feeling and see
Exactly.
what happens when you manage to create that space between your thoughts and your feelings and whatever it is that you are experiencing? So maybe there is in that space, maybe that distance there can make you feel a little bit more at ease within yourself,
Yeah.
and give you a bit more space to maybe decide to react or think differently to something. So I think that's usually where we start with the disidentification. It's about feelings oftentimes.
Do you have any specific techniques you are using? Some use chair works, other use other, because sometimes, these feelings and opinions, they can be so up in our face, so it's very strange for some people to even think about that they are not their feelings and thoughts, because it has become so ingrained. Because if I'm not my feelings, who I am then? It's quite mysterious.
Yes. Well, breathing, I think, is like now I'm stuck. So if you you can say that go into this situation with your with your partner or your daughter or your whatever colleague or your boss, go into that. Imagine, you start to imagine being in that situation. You start to feel those feelings, and maybe you can now start to breathe into them and just see how it is when you can just start to breathe. So breathing techniques I found has been quite useful, and so gradually learning how to hold the feelings, not necessarily sort of start to react on them the moment you get them.
Exactly, yes. So you could call it some kind of a witnessing work,
Yes.
witnessing what's emerging when I think about this situation, and learning to describe them, and just speak about them. And what you introduced, you said that you are not your feelings, just this information that you are not your information. And I try to, sometimes I tell clients that anything you can observe is not you, because you're the observer. And this is a very, very, it's a very, very simple way of okay, yeah, that makes sense, that if I can observe something, then it's distant, then it's an object, and I'm not an object, I'm actually the subject. So, and Ken Wilber uses this phrase, and he got it from, now I don't know where it came from, but Ken Wilber uses it, that it's about turning subjects into objects. And subjects is our identifications, with thoughts, with opinions, with inner voices, with sub-personalities, with emotions. And when we start observing them and taking the identity, because disidentification is followed by self-identification. Self-identification is realizing that I am the observer. And I would say I am the loving observer. I am the one who create a space, accept what's going on within me, and now try to build a relation between me as the loving observer and this opinion or this feeling or this drama that is going on inside of me. And I think this is where psychosynthesis in many ways is different from other more talking therapies, and that is that we give them life skills. We give them skills to handle the content of their consciousness. So when they go out of our room, then they have not only got a theory, but they have got an experience that, wow, many of my clients have said, I can't believe that I've started to be able to observe what's going on inside of me. I've never thought about that I could observe my emotions, or I could question my thoughts. I always thought that any voice that I hear in my head is me and must be relevant, but now I can see that I can actually take a step back and I can question the nature of that voice. Where does it come from? What does it say? Do I agree? And just, create this gap that you were speaking about. And I think these type of life skills, and it's actually wisdom, it's actually giving people new perspectives of who they are, so they can start observing the impact from social media, from group, and not just follow these rampant ideologies of all various kinds. Because it's if we don't have a center, and that's very, very important in psychosynthesis, as you know, it's all about finding the center, and the center is the loving observer. And when we have started to create gaps, then we also can start having more informed choices. We can start choosing what to think, choosing what to believe, choosing how to behave. Of course, that's an ideal. Very often we are driven by subconscious forces, and as long as it's unconscious, we cannot do much about it. But we can start making the unconscious conscious, and that's actually what it's all about.
Yes, no doubt. But how do you do it in practice, in psychotherapy? I guess that's always the challenge. But in my experience, I don't know how it is with you, I feel that having some kind of patience and understanding that this actually is a process that takes a little bit of time, it's also important. But it's very necessary to start to question these identities that we have in order to liberate ourselves from some of the pressures that we get on, for example, social media. So we have some way of living a bit more, back to the word, authentic life, and maybe a better mental health as well.
Definitely, and we should be very honest and say that knowing oneself, or learning to know oneself, is really a tough work, because there's so many layers within that we have just adopted, and it's become part of our lived experience and identity, and we don't question them. But when we first start to find this center where we start observing what's going on, so I have some simple steps whenever I work with a client, no matter actually what type of client. I know that the first thing I have to train them is to be able to observe what's going on in them, and I would call it a present-based psychotherapy, training the client to be present with what's going on in their body, what's going on in their emotional level, what type of thoughts is emerging when we investigate some presenting issue. And just this this technique is gradually creating a center of observation. And the next skill is also, and this is a very important thing, that we offer acceptance to whatever we find within, because sometimes we have some stuff inside that we are not very proud of and have a lot of shame about. So the next quality we would like to bring in from a psychosynthesis point of view is love, to be able to hold a compassionate space for whatever is emerging. And this is where then we are back to having this space where we can explore whatever is going on, voicing our most distasteful opinions and finding out the root for them and where they are coming from. And the next thing after acceptance is also the will, because the will is to own it. I say, yes, this is part of me now, and perhaps this it's not an authentic part of me, but it's still part of me, and I have to do work in order to overcome this. So the will comes in as some kind of authority where we step up and say, yes, this is me at this moment in time and space. So we are not spiritual bypassing or excusing something, but confront. It's actually a choice to really confront ourselves with our darkest issues, and this is applying the will, and it takes a lot of courage to look into the abyss, and sometimes name all kind of energies and processes in us that is not very pleasant to look at, because they can be very harmful to ourselves, but also to our surroundings. So this is some of the steps in finding this core identity that's always based on a point of pure awareness and will, according to psychosynthesis.
So what I'm hearing here is that actually does involve both, work and discipline. It doesn't come easy. It's something you have to dedicate yourself to this, because it takes time. And, you're saying the will, for me, the will is so important to engage, because it is the will that's going to give you the sort of dedication and focus and discipline to continue doing this. Otherwise, because it's going to be so uncomfortable, and the easiest thing would be not to bother with it and just continue the way you always had.
Yeah, and that's where I see that it's so important also to help the client manifest their insights, the insights that we create in the therapeutic space, helping them to manifest them in their social sphere, because it's quite difficult to start speaking your truth if that truth is very uncomfortable for your social groups, and it takes a lot of time for me and for people to start voicing that truth. But I think that we have not birthed or manifested our authentic identity before we can be that identity in our social groups, because this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. This is where we see if we have a strong enough will to take the social pressures, to stand up against all these external forces. And how have you experienced that?
The first thing that springs to mind when you talk about this is actually the meeting with the survival personality.
Oh yeah.
How important it is to start to, well, you can, talk a little bit about the survival personality according to Julia. That would be quite good now, I think.
Yeah, you start speaking about what is the survival personality in your experience?
In my experience, it is it's almost like the way you believe and think and manage yourself in relation to other people, based on how you've been taught you should be doing it.
Exactly.
So it's almost like it's the safe way of being you when you grow up. So it's a conditioned sort of person. It's your conditioned personality. And it sometimes feel like wearing a suit that is either too big or too little, but you don't know how to take it off.
No.
So I think that's oftentimes the first thing you start to do in psychotherapy is actually start looking at your survival personality and how it's not suitable for who you feel yourself to be and what you want to do and achieve with your life, because
Yeah.
that personality is restricting you in every possible way. It's
Yeah.
making you into a people pleaser, good girl, good boy, or too assertive, exhibitionistic, always need attention to feel valued. You never know what it's going to look like.
No.
But then, starting to work with that and unpack that personality it's important work.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it. It's a conditioned self, yes, based on what was acceptable to your social surroundings, and underneath it is all the repressed and all the taboos and all the parts of you that has been shamed and dissociated from your personality. So you have this social mask that you wear, and where you build your social identity upon, because it gives you some type of security, some kind of inclusion, but it's not an individualized identity at all. And very often we are not aware that we are wearing this suit. It's just become so ingrained in our behavior. I recognize really, at the age of 25, I had a big confrontation with a part of me I called Mr. Smiling Face. And it was simply just, that was part of my survival personality, always meeting people with a lot of positivity and Mr. Smiling Face. And it became at some point so stiff and so crystallized. I was almost strangled by it. So I had to I started psychotherapy there at that young age. And I really had to have a couple of years where I went to another extreme, becoming very serious, not smiling, only in myself. But I needed to go out to that extreme in order to feel who I am. And then later, of course, I found a balance in it. But we all have these social masks that is constraining us, and it's actually a prison from some point of view.
Yes. Yeah. I think so much of therapy is actually working with that survival personality, that conditioned self. I think it takes up the first year of work at least. So we always come back to it because the conditioning happens so early. So it's so deeply ingrained in our unconsciousness as like an instinctual response to anything. So it's really quite difficult to transform it and make it become something a bit more close to who you feel yourself to be, not what other people want you to be.
Yeah, and my experience is also that when people start taking off this suit, it involves very often conflict with the surroundings, because they have become so used to that particular behavior, and they cannot recognize the individual when he or she starts to play a different roles, having opinions they have never had before, or wearing clothes they have never appeared with before. And it really takes a lot of courage to start expressing this new identity that are more or less, where you get small, authentic qualities in. But there's no way around it. If you want to show up in the world in a comfortable manner and feeling that you are aligned with yourself, this is simply a must to let go of that survival personality. That's for sure.
Yes, there is no other way, as you say. I think, well, of course there is, but usually people that comes into therapy can't live with it anymore for some reason.
Yeah,
And then this is usually the first kind of work that is happening, is start to understand why you keep getting yourself into situations or relationships that you don't want.
exactly.
Why don't I know what's good for me? It's because you don't
Yeah,
know who you are, that's
yeah,
why.
yeah. And now I imagine you have a dog coming by.
I have a dog coming by. She's not getting sufficient attention.
Yes, and I
So,
actually think we should wrap it up because I think we have covered it. In some way, we could speak about this for hours, but the initial question we asked was, how can we help people who are stuck in social media narratives? How can we help them free themselves from these pressures, from these peer pressures? And very often they are stuck in these narratives because actually they come from their survival personality. Uh, and they are attached to social acknowledgement, social validation, ego validation. And when that need comes from inauthenticity, from these false identities, from this survival personalities, then it will always be something, that can never be fulfilling in any way because
yeah,
it's built on a false ground. So
yeah,
what we suggest is that people have to disidentify from these social medias, perhaps take a break, take a pause, finding some people, perhaps a psychotherapist that can help them create a space, a safe space where they can think freely, express freely. And sometimes they have to leave social groups, move
yeah.
from the city, move to another place where they meet totally new people and they can start experimenting with a new social identity. That is
Yes.
some of the steps. What would you, as a conclusion, say to this?
Yes, I would say exactly the same. Maybe also this get off social media for a while, stop posting things, try to wean off that dopamine effect of having likes and followers, see
Yeah,
that there is also some kind of addiction involved here as well. But I think absolutely, I think getting off social media, getting off your phone for a certain period of time, and as you said, meeting with someone, whether it's a therapist or a trusted adult, I think that you can explore these, insecurities and feelings and identities and stories that you keep telling yourself. I think
yeah,
that's a very good place to start.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so pleased and blessed and happy about this conversation. I think we really had a good flow and offered some suggestions. And I would really like to invite you that has viewed this conversation. Was there anything we missed? Was there anything we said that upset you, or anything we could have put differently? Then please just use the comments and we will look at it and see if we can create more wholeness and more informed opinions about these great topics. Of course, we have not come all around, but I think we touch on some of the essential points in relation to this big problem. So I would just say thank you so much for being a good conversation partner. And I can promise the viewers that Anja and I will, we have more in store. And so you will hear more from us. So all the best. And thank you so much, Anja. It was
Thank
really
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.